when he was born, so the diagnosis of trisomy 18, how it's defined is there's a 50% chance that most babies will pass away within days. 50% don't live past the first week. 5% live to be a year old. And there's no statistics really on over ages than that.
But based on his heart condition.
Correct.
They told us that he'd never leave to see the outside of a hospital.
Yes.
Yeah.
This week, we meet another kiddo who was told that, due to his diagnosis, he was incompatible with life. Now, jumping ahead and spoiling the story for you, he is turning 10 years old this month. I'm Seth Carnell, and this is the Go Shout Love podcast. We are surrounded by fresh country open air here in Nebraska, and are settled in the living room watching Karder jump, yes, jump in his homemade jumper. He has the biggest smile on his face, which has been there since we've arrived. Karder lives a full life with his loving family, which includes his 2 younger brothers, Knox and Cohen. Throughout this episode, you might hear all 3 boys in the background, jumping and rolling around as boys do. Today we are talking with Lacey and Mitch as they break down for us life with Karder, beginning with receiving his diagnosis of trisomy 18 and how that diagnosis labeled his early life and propelled him to the boy he is now. If you listened last week, we featured another kiddo, Charolette, who also has trisomy 18. There are a lot of similarities to these stories as well as some uniqueness for each one. Lacey and Mitch will help guide us along their medical journey and then the impact Karder has had on them, their boys, and their community. In this conversation is Josh Veach, our executive director, and Jessica Santo, our family relations director and talented photographer.
Well, tell us about Karder's personality and what he loves to do and what makes him smile the most.
He absolutely loves being around his peers, his classmates, his friends, his brothers, family. He loves attention when people are holding his hands and looking into his face and tickling him or
he's definitely not shy.
No.
He loves to be around people, it seems.
And it very much, we've never been able to get an exact hearing analysis or an exact vision. We feel like that he hears what he wants to hear, and that's people saying his name, and that's the giggling of his brothers. They've told us that he can't hear anything less than a vacuum cleaner level sound, and we just don't believe that, because you'll say his name and he looks at you, or he smiles, or he hears his brothers giggling, and it makes him happy too. So he loves watching them play, and obviously them playing with him too. He loves his bouncer. Mm-hmm. He absolutely loves being in that, and being able to maneuver around the house, whether that's in his gait trainer or on the floor scooting. He gets to where he wants to go. Mm-hmm. And outside, he likes to be outside. He loves going on the 4-wheeler for rides. Mm-hmm. He loves being on the boat, in the water. He even likes being pulled in the tube behind the water, which Knox doesn't even really love that much, but Karder does. He just kind of likes that thrill.
Wow. How do you guys do that with him on the tube?
It's at an idle and somebody's holding on to him.
Yes,
not just saying he's on by himself.
It's not full-blown tubing.
No, it is very much coasting. Obviously he has an appropriate life jacket on and always with an adult too, and just going super slow.
He's definitely not lacking in adventure.
No, he loves that kind of thrill. Almost even just like the hanging upside down. He loves just that blood rush.
He loves roughhousing.
Yes, and roughhousing and wrestling and all of that too.
We'll get into a little bit more of the medical stuff here in a second, but I'm curious because he's 9 now, and I'm curious if you were able to just jump into those adventures from the very beginning with his complexities, or did it take some time to feel comfortable with Like if I were to talk to you guys when he was 1 and to say, hey, you're gonna get him in a tube when he's 8 and 9.
No.
What
Yeah.
you don't think that's happening?
Nope.
You know, it's interesting because at 1 is when I will say at 1 is when I finally let out a breath. We were told when he was born there'd be a 5% chance that he'd live to be 1 year old, to be a year old. And so I remember when he did turn 1, and we had a couple birthday celebrations for him, and he had his 1 year checkup with just our pediatrician, and the pediatrician said, where do we go from here? And I said, treat him like you would any other 1 year old. And that's kind of how we started at that point, was when we started not counting the days, and really just looking, I would like to say we were looking forward to the years, but still just knowing whatever time we got was the time that God wanted us to have. So it was exciting to hit 1, but I would have never dreamed that we would be at 10, for sure.
Yeah. Mitch, how would you describe Carter's relationship with his brothers?
I don't know. It's different. It's different with him versus the other 2. He is their big brother, but I don't think they look at him as a big brother. They look like Knox definitely looks at him more as a little brother, which especially now where Knox is bigger than he is, it's way more prevalent now. But they play with him, they treat him just like any other kid. I mean, he's their brother, and they don't know any different. So,
Do you think that Knox has that kind of little dad in him for him a little bit, kind of that little, wants to make sure he's taken care of, and
very much so.
and that just probably came naturally to him as he's grown up and has seen
Yeah.
you guys do it, and it's a really big gift that the siblings of these kiddos get.
You know, we definitely think that way. Our Knox and Cohen are, hi buddy. Knox and Cohen, I think, are very fortunate in the fact that they are growing up next to a brother that has special needs, because they're growing up not knowing what different is. Like Mitch said, that's their brother, that's Carter. And just the other night, Knox, it was so sweet. We were getting him ready for bed, and Knox said, Mom, when Carter grows up, is he going to be able to walk? And I said, you know what, buddy? I said, we don't have any reason not to think he will. He's already doing better than he was a year ago. And he said, well, do you think he will be able to talk? And I said, you know, buddy, maybe someday. Well, Mom, when Carter grows up, do you think he'll be able to drive a car? And I said, we don't know, bud. You know, well, we can only imagine what that will be like. So,
there's like this innocence to the youth that
For sure.
in the medical field, and even as adults, we start in situations that are tough. We default to thinking of assuming someone can't. We had a recent mom that was telling us that one of the biggest emphasis they've had in their approach was to start with, to assume not yet versus can't.
For sure.
And just to assume that it might be in the future. We recognize that it might not be, but we're not going to assume that doing X, Y, or Z will never happen. And it's so cool that for Knox, and which will be for
Yes.
Cohen as well, like that will be the default, is
Yes.
not yet or maybe will be the default versus assuming something isn't possible. That's so cool.
for sure.
I've got my eyes on him, you don't worry about it.
So you find out that a baby's on the way, and I'm assuming your action might be similar to most young couples, that we're excited.
For sure. We were very excited. We wanted to have kids right away, and when we found out we were pregnant, our due date was actually on our 1 year anniversary. And so we're very excited about that. And I had a great pregnancy. We did not know anything before Carter was born. And so had a great pregnancy until I developed high blood pressure. And I was put on bed rest for the last 5 weeks of my pregnancy. And as first-time parents, just kind of listened to the doctor and followed those orders and didn't push anything. And
But even during that period, vitals are good.
For sure.
Scans.
There was
look
nothing
good.
on an ultrasound.
The only thing on an ultrasound they ever questioned was like a month out. They measured his head on the ultrasound and thought his head was
huge.
Huge. Oh.
But I was born with a huge
Yeah,
head.
my babies all have huge
Yeah.
heads.
Yes.
So it wasn't like a gigantic red flag. It was something they looked at
You
a couple of
probably
times.
laughed
and-
about it.
Yeah.
Right. I was like, okay, great. No, we had the normal 20-week anatomy ultrasound. Everything was fine, or looked fine according to that. And we did have an ultrasound at like 35 weeks, kind of a stress test ultrasound. And they paused a little bit there, and then they said, the baby's head is really big. And so just kind of letting your doctor know. And now we know in hindsight, his head looked so big because his body was so small. He weighed 5 pounds, 1 ounce when he was born, and he was only 18 inches long. And so we, continued on with, after that 35 weeks, at 38 weeks, my blood pressure was still pretty high. And so we planned to induce at 39 weeks and went in for that. First-time parents not knowing what to expect from that experience, and just kind of followed everything along. And they started the first, I think, cervix softener. And we were just getting ready to kind of get some rest. It was like 11 o'clock at night. We checked in at maybe 6 or 7, and by 11 o'clock we're like, okay, let's get some rest. And bam, like the nurses come running in, oxygen drops out of the ceiling. They're laying me back.
And did you have any idea what was going on?
No.
Because you felt fine?
Correct. And it was maybe 30 seconds. It felt like 5 minutes. But they said, you're having contractions, and the baby's heart rate is not responding to these contractions. And I was thinking, these are contractions? Because I was just about to fall asleep. This is going to be okay. And they said, well, they were pretty mild contractions. But yeah, when you would have a contraction, the baby's heart rate would drop, and it was not recovering. So we're going to contact your doctor, see what they want to do. And our doctor said, let's stop the inducing and wait till morning. Like, let's just give them the night, kind of wait till morning. And so the next morning, right before 7 o'clock, same thing. They come rushing in, oxygen on me, and all of this. And they said, yeah, same thing's happening again, is that you're starting to have contractions and baby's not doing well with that. And so our doctor came in right away, and she said, I just kind of feel like we need to maybe proceed with a C-section. I don't want to put you and the baby through labor all day and then us end up doing a C-section anyway. We feel like this is just maybe the best thing to do right now. Again, first-time parents, we loved our doctor and we trusted her, and we're like, whatever you got, if you want to do a C-section, let's do a C-section. Sure. And so she didn't call it an emergency C-section, but she said, we're going to just kind of go straight into this. And so at 8:30, he was born, and the doctor said, it's a boy, and the nurse said, Dad, do you want to come over and see your son? And Mitch got up and walked over, and our doctor stopped him. And of course, I couldn't see any of this because I was on the C-section table, have a curtain up, and our doctor stopped Mitch, and what did she say to you?
She just shook her head at me and told me not to tell Lacey what Karder had wrong with him, that everything was fine, so that she didn't have any complications due to stress.
And at that point, Karder was gray.
He was gray.
And he's covered in everything, and
his hands
and his arms.
So that was the first thing I noticed when I walked up was his hands and arms, and then I looked over at her and she just shook her head, and as I was walking back is when she told me not to say anything. So
How do
So
you
if someone's hasn't seen a video
Well, like
yet,
in the
so
C-section,
describe-
there's that. Oh, sorry.
well,
go ahead.
specific to his hands. So describe what the condition that you saw.
Karder actually does have most of the bones that are in a normal arm, but his forearm is extremely shortened to the point where it basically looks like his hands are attached to his elbows, and his hands are pointed back towards his chest.
And that's how it was.
That's how it was
birth.
right there.
And it was very tight, and the hands were clasped, and it's called radiolaplasia, and so it looked very tight and close to his body, and then there was these little hands, and he just has 4 fingers, no thumbs, and so that is what Mitch saw. And then he came back over to me, and I said, how is he? Or I don't even remember what I said. And I could tell Mitch was wanting to cry, and I thought, we just had our first child. Of course, I'm emotional too, and I started to go into a little bit of shock just with kind of a rush C-section and everything, and Mitch was right there, and it's like, it's okay, they're finishing up, they're almost finished. And as soon as they did get done, they said, okay, we're gonna get Mom back to the room. Dad, if you want to go out, we'll meet you back at the room.
And so at this point, you still haven't seen
I knew we had a boy.
Yeah. No clue.
Yeah, I had no clue. And so I was taken back to the room, and some nurses came in and kind of started just what I thought was normal post-delivery care. Back up just a little bit, our doctor did tell us before we did the C-section, she said, now sometimes C-section babies do need to go to the NICU just because they don't go through the birthing canal. Sometimes they need a little bit of oxygen, maybe a little extra suctioning to just kind of get them cleared out. So if we have to do that, don't be too alarmed. And so when they told us that we're going to take Karder to the NICU just to kind of check him over and do a little oxygen, it did not concern me at all, because my doctor had just told me that this might be happening. And so I didn't think anything about it. And I went back to the room, and it was after 10 before anybody came into the room.
And Mitch, at this time, what are the thoughts that are going through your head?
When we got back to the room, I lost it.
Well, when you walked out of the operating room, our family was in the hallway.
Correct, and I couldn't say anything to them. I just had to tell them there was complications, that he went to the NICU to get some oxygen, and then when we got back to the room, I told her what I had seen, the way Karder looked and some other stuff, and of course I can't describe it to her in a way that probably made any sense to her at the time.
So this whole time, though, you were asked to put on a poker face that you weren't prepared.
Yeah.
Was
the
not
next-
in your plans.
The next 48 hours were a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when,
I think your mic got disconnected.
oh gosh.
That's okay.
See the box roll.
No problem.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
You're fine. You might have just,
Puppy.
Cohen, why can't you stay with Dad, or with Knox?
Don't put stuff in your ear.
Is that a pretzel?
No,
Okay,
it's
sorry.
a piece of Lego.
Lego.
He's just sitting there sticking it in his ear.
So when finally everybody kind of starts walking into the room, Mitch walks in, my mom, his mom, and they all are tearing, crying, and smiling. And so I'm thinking, this was the first grandchild on both sides. And I was thinking, everybody's excited. And our doctor came in, and she told us that, she said, Lacey, there's a couple things about Karder that we want to talk to you about. And she said one of them is his arms. His arms are a little bit different, and she explained it that they, it's kind of like he has hands at his elbows. And Cohen, hi. And I I thought, and Mitch started crying at that point. And I looked over at him and I said, sweetheart, it's fine. You're still going to be able to teach him how to throw a football. Like, he's going to adapt to playing with these arms. Cohen, come here. Okay. And so she said, she said, and then we've done a little bit of some scans, and we think that he might have some heart defects. And so we're actually getting ready to do some additional scans just to kind of see what that all entails. But, you know, here in a couple hours, we'll get you to the NICU to go see him. And at that time, everybody left the room except for Mitch and I, and he was crying because he had seen him. Cohen. And I kept saying, Mitch, it's okay. It's okay. He's going to learn how to do everything he wants to do. You know, he's not going to know any different. And like Mitch just said, if we had only known what the next 48 hours would entail, for sure.
Because when
Cohen.
she's telling you that, were you thinking, were you thinking it's worse than what you
It's bigger than that.
Cohen.
They originally thought
Our doctor originally told us that he had
TAR syndrome, which is thrombopenia with absence of the radius, which is like your body doesn't make platelets, so they bleed out easy, bruise easy, but then you're born without the radius in your arm, is what they originally thought.
And so once they did the heart scans, they did notice that he had 3 holes in his heart, and that he needed to be transported to Omaha. And that was 4 hours away from our home hospital. And so it was no decision. Mitch and his parents were going to go with Karder to Omaha, and my mom stayed with me in North Platte in our hospital. And that was, they left that afternoon about 4 o'clock. And we did get to go down to the NICU and see Karder before he was transported. And I did get to hold him for a few minutes.
What did you think the first time you saw Karder?
It was overwhelming. He was so tiny, and his color wasn't pink. It wasn't.
He was very bluish.
He was very bluish gray, yeah. And he was on oxygen right away. They put him on oxygen, and so it definitely wasn't what I had imagined to be. And what did you find, Cohen? Yeah. And so he was transported by airplane to Omaha, and Mitch and his parents drove and met him there. And I had to stay because I had had a C-section and I needed to recover there. And so when he arrived at Omaha, the doctors there instantly noticed markers for a chromosomal abnormality. And so they instantly started doing genetic testing.
What were those? Do you know what those markers were instantly?
Yeah. So his ears being low set, his jaw being shortened and kind of sloped, recessed, like the bridge of his nose, and his arms were a little bit of a marker, and then also just additionally having the heart issues were all things to show that there was maybe something chromosomal going on. And the next afternoon, a doctor came in to talk to Mitch and his parents. I'll let you.
If you've ever been to Children's Hospital, I will say that is like the greatest experience. It's terrible at the time.
If you have to have a child.
But if you have to have a child go there, that is an amazing place to be. So yeah, that next afternoon, the doctor came in and I was actually sitting there holding Karder for one of the few times I was allowed to do that, because he had like 28 cords attached to him and every monitor in the world. But yeah, the doctor came in and told us that he had 3/18 chromosomes, and that his outlook was not great, but they still wanted to do some more testing. At that point, I had to leave the hospital. I had to go reflect on myself for a while. So I gave Karder over to my mom and went outside and sat in the vehicle for probably an hour and a half or so before I was able to come back in and actually talk to the doctor and ask them questions.
And you're still not with Lacey at this
No.
point? Yeah.
It was horrible. Absolutely horrible.
He agrees. Karder.
He hasn't done that in a while.
He loves to blow those raspberries, and he hasn't done it for a while until recently. But, and you actually called our family doctor,
yeah.
who
What are you
who
doing?
delivered
Do you wanna
Karder
come out here with us?
back home, and was just like, Dr. Gosnell explained to me, what this means. The doctors are telling us that he has trisomy 18. What is that?
She was literally on the computer looking it up because she had never heard of it at that point in time. Well,
Wasn't as familiar.
wasn't as
Sure.
familiar.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And so I was released the next day and came down, and Mitch had shared that with his family, that to not say anything to me when I first arrived until he was able to talk to me later that evening. And so when I got to Omaha, I was exhausted because I was still recovering from a C-section, but I was so excited to be with my baby and my husband. And at this point, we're all still thinking that he has this TAR syndrome and maybe needs some heart stuff, and not concerned. And so I got to hold him, and we got to spend a couple hours together in the NICU, and nurses came in and out, and nobody said anything.
Bodie.
And it wasn't until that night, or that later that evening, when we got back to the motel room, that Mitch sat me down on the bed, and he said, I need to talk to you about Karder. And I'll never forget, I was putting lotion on, and I said, okay. And he said, no, I need you to listen to me. And he said, the doctors have found out that Karder, he doesn't have TAR syndrome. He has trisomy 18. And I said, okay. And he said, Lacey, it's not good. They said there's only a 50% chance that he'll live past a week, and there's only a 5% chance that he'll live to be a year old. And I said, okay. And he said, I don't think you understand. You're not listening. Like, you don't understand what I'm saying. Karder only has a 5% chance that he'll live. And I said, I only need 1% chance to know that he's going to make it.
Wow.
So it wasn't denial. It was
loves
just
that thing.
you had hope, regardless of the facts that you were absorbing the facts, and still said, I still believe that there's hope beyond what they're saying.
I think I was optimistic. I had no reason not to. I didn't hear it from a doctor. I didn't hear it the way that Mitch heard it, which was very matter-of-factly, and
Right.
this is facts, and this is medical, and this is science. I was hearing it from my compassionate husband, who was trying to break the hardest news to
Sure.
me in the most loving and careful way, and I almost refused to accept it, that was 5% chance. I need 1% chance to believe. And we did cry together that night, but I kept thinking, I just need 1%. I just need 1% to believe. But the next morning was kind of the hardest. And I knew that I was coming to Omaha, and on that following day, we would be meeting with a team of doctors to. I knew that I was meeting with a team of doctors. I thought it was to go over his heart and to go over his arms, and it was actually to develop his care plan, which means, what do you want to do for your baby who is terminal? And you walk into this big boardroom, and there is cardiologists and pulmonologists and geneticists and a hospitalist, and our nurses who had been caring for Karder the past 2 days were in there, and this team of doctors. And we sat down with our parents were with us, and they kind of explained to us that this was to make a plan for Karder's care for the foreseeable future.
Which would primarily mean comfort.
Correct, comfort care.
At that point in time, it was like, do you want to do open heart surgery and try to fix the holes? Do you want to... I remember what all it was.
Yeah.
That was by far the biggest one, and I even got into a pretty heated argument with the heart doctor on whether or not he should have that surgery, and we got in a pretty good yelling match in the middle of the hospital.
Yeah. Because he was suggesting that he should not?
His comment was it was a smoking gun and it had to be fixed. He was 99% positive that he could fix his heart, but our regular doctor said that there was maybe a 20% chance that he would survive the surgery, just being put under and having to go through all that. And that was my argument with him, and it got pretty heated.
So the argument was that the cardiologist could perform, he's saying I can fix the problem with the heart, but I can't control all the other things that could be
For
a ripple
sure.
effect
Exactly.
of
For
what the surgery would cause it to his
Exactly.
body.
Yep.
The cardiologist said, he goes, I have done this heart surgery thousands of times. I can fix his heart. Karder might not wake up from the anesthesia.
Yeah.
And the pulmonologist explained to us that his lungs were not developed enough, that they were not strong enough, that he would probably not wake up from that surgery. And
The other thing was the valve, the
PDA valve.
PDA valve had to stay open on Karder because they thought when it closed that he would essentially suffocate, or
So all
die
babies,
to-
when
yeah.
in utero, the PDA valve is open and mom helps to pump that blood through to the heart. And when they are born, the valve closes shortly after birth, and then their body continues to, to start pumping blood through. And they said that when Karder's PDA valve closed, that his body was not strong enough to be able to pump the blood through, and so that he would ultimately pass away from that. And so that was part of the heart surgery, was going to be doing that.
Sure.
And I think as any parents, you would give your own heart if you could for your children, right? I mean, that's just the easiest thing to say. You would do whatever. If a cardiologist is telling us he has to have surgery to fix his heart, you would follow that doctor. But it was very, I don't know if easy is the right word, to make that choice. When one of the doctors said, I think we need to think about Karder's quality over quantity. What do you want his quality of life to be? And thinking about him passing away during surgery was a whole lot harder for me to grasp than maybe passing away in my arms without the surgery. And ultimately, at that appointment, we said we don't want to do heart surgery.
Right. So the medical position at that time was the what needs to be done from the heart is at the heart level is absolutely necessary for life.
Correct.
This has to happen, but it can't happen if you want to really experience as much quality time with him as possible and for him to have a quality life.
Right.
So how do you move forward after that meeting?
So he was on a medicine that kept that valve open, which was a ridiculous amount. I remember it was like $1,400 a day or something like that. It was something stupid. So they kept him on that. Obviously, we were in Omaha, so we kind of went from the pods, like the NICU pods, to basically a hospice room, which is still on the NICU level.
But it was private.
But it was more private, just in case something did happen. We had the room with him. Mm-hmm. The family that could come to see him and meet him came, and at that point, we had him baptized.
The very next day, we had him baptized at Children's Hospital by the chaplain of the Children's Omaha Hospital, who was amazing. And actually, a bunch of our friends and family all traveled down to Omaha to meet Karder that day.
There's a pile
40?
Of people in there. I can't believe they had us do it,
40
but-
people in the room and in the hallways, and they actually came in and they said, this is like a fire code. We need to have some of you kind of like clear the hallways a little bit. And so we had him baptized that next day at Children's, and then that was on a Sunday. And then on Monday, we said we want to try to go back home to our home hospital to be closer to family to proceed on with this journey.
Yeah.
And that actually took a couple days to line up. They contacted our doctor back home, and she said, absolutely, we'll make a room in the hospital here, essentially for hospice care. And, we'll have nurses, we'll have whatever you guys need for you to come back. And that took 4 days. And so when Karder was 8 days old, he was transported back from Omaha Children's back to our home hospital. And that was on a Thursday. We had more family come and meet him on Friday, and friends. And on Saturday, a few more family. And on Sunday, it was just kind of for us to spend the day with him. And on Monday morning, at like 7 a.m., they came in and shut off the medicine that we thought was keeping his heart
So
alive.
this whole time, it's been a week and a day or two.
Correct.
And all of these people are coming to meet Karder.
Correct.
And also say goodbye to Karder.
For sure.
And you're wrestling with this a really exciting time and this deep, heavy grief that's pending, and probably maybe you're already experiencing some of it. And so you've had your entire day, and then they come in and they turn off what you think is sustaining his life.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so did they give you an expectation on
And I
timing from
guess,
that?
I
backing up,
remember them telling us it was like,
they said it could be a couple hours, it could be 2 hours, it could be 2 days.
yeah.
And we knew that Monday morning
Was our day. Yeah.
was the time.
day that was happening.
He couldn't stay on this medicine forever.
Sure.
I mean, obviously, if that was something, we would have chose that medicine.
Yeah.
He couldn't be on the medicine forever, and so we spent the weekend getting as many people to meet him and essentially say goodbye at the same time, and knowing we spent Sunday just with us and our immediate family. And I remember when they walked in and they were like, it's time to shut everything off. And so we still had monitors on him, but obviously they turned all the monitors down so that we wouldn't hear the beeping and stuff. And Mitch and I sat holding Karder in a dark hospital room for hours, just staring at him, thinking that he was going to just slowly slip away. And I remember not really even talking much because we just were staring at him. We were just waiting for this to happen. And at one moment, we were finally like, I really have to go to the bathroom, or like I have to move because my legs are numb. And we both kind of agreed, kind of joked and got up and I got up, I think, to go to the bathroom, and Mitch walked out of the room, and our parents and some super close friends were all in the waiting room, and they all started crying.
Because they think that's the sign that he's
Yes.
passed.
Yeah.
Yes, and they thought that's what they thought he was coming out to tell them. And Mitch was like, no, we just kind of need a break. And so I think at that point we maybe kind of let our moms come in and spend some time holding him, because it had been like 8 hours at this point. And so that was a Monday. And so Monday night, and what was great, in our hospice room, we had a bed. So we stayed in the hospital with Karder right there. And so Monday night, we spent the night, and Karder's still, doing great. And Tuesday, all day Tuesday, he's still doing great.
And he's not on oxygen either?
He was on
He's on
oxygen.
oxygen.
So they took him off of everything. They took him off of oxygen and everything, and it wasn't very long into it, his lips started turning purple, and I instantly said, I cannot watch this. Like, his heart can fail, I can deal with that, but I'm not going to watch my kid
Suffocate.
turn blue. Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm not going to watch that.
Right.
And so they came back in and put him on a little bit of oxygen, and it wasn't much, but
No,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
enough.
But I mean, effectively, his body's doing most of the work.
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. He was on. He had an NG tube, so a feeding tube through the nose.
Yeah.
And we were giving him breast milk, just a few mLs through the NG tube, and he had a little bit of oxygen on. And so again, we sat all day Tuesday, waiting for this to happen. And I think either Tuesday night or Wednesday, I looked at Mitch and I said, I want to go home. Because initially, I couldn't fathom the idea of losing my child at home in a recliner that I was going to walk past every single day. But then you spend, at this point, Carter's 2 weeks old. You spend the first 2 weeks of their life in the hospital and you just want to go home. And so we told our doctor, we said, we want to go home. We want to continue hospice care at home. And so they made it happen. We got oxygen tanks and a home health nurse and a car seat bed to transport Carter home because he was too little to go in an actual car seat. And so then at 2 weeks and 1 day, we went home for the first time and continued on this thinking, okay, it's more than 2 days. And they told us it would be 2 hours to 2 days. And so just really holding our breath, waiting for it to happen.
Everything at this point's borrowed time.
Correct.
Yes.
Exactly.
Still doom and gloom.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's all percentages and numbers at that point.
And so that was a Thursday. We sat at home on Friday and on Saturday and Sunday. And Mitch has to go back to work, right? I mean, paternity care is up and it's time for him to go back to work. And the night before he went back to work, I remember him saying to me, sweetheart, if something happens while I'm gone, are you going to be okay? And I said, well, no, I'm not going to be okay. But I said, I'm prepared for it to happen. Moms find their kids who have passed away from SIDS and they don't have any idea. And I said, I'm preparing myself for this to happen. But I didn't put him down for all day. I didn't want to miss something. And
We took shifts.
And our moms came and would stay and they would take shifts. I mean, he was never just in his crib or in his bassinet. Yeah. Somebody was always holding and watching him. And that was kind of for the first month of his life, was just waiting. And then we celebrated his 1 month birthday. And I remember thinking, we can't continue to live waiting for it to happen. We just need to live life and
at
show
this point,
Carter.
no, doctors still haven't told you to do that.
What was that?
The doctors still haven't told you to do that at this point.
You're-
They're still telling you
Borrowed time.
anytime.
It's borrowed time.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. And we had a home health nurse that came out. She would check his vitals, and she's like, it's about the same, and we're just gonna kind of keep. I'll see you tomorrow and things like that, and so we did not know. We had no idea what to think of when or what, and I honestly felt like it's any minute because this is so much more time than we were told we would have. And so that was at a month, though, was kind of when we really did change that focus of going from waiting for it to happen to just living life. And
How would you describe the emotional toll of that 1 month?
Exhausting. That holding your breath every moment is exhausting. Mm-hmm. Absolutely exhausting.
Yes, it was. You go through every emotion too. Like every grief emotion, just in being in denial and angry and shock. And, I asked God why more times than not those first month, why us, why Karder, why this, why not, why everything. And it was very hard to see something good coming from this. I mean, we were going to bury our first child, and that just didn't seem fair at all. And so it was exhausting because you want to be happy, and we took more pictures in that first month, than probably most kids have in their first year, just because every single facial expression we captured. And he did sleep a lot, and we have pictures holding him while he was sleeping and surrounded by stuffed animals and just everything, so we would never miss or forget a memory from those, what we thought were days.
So he had a 5% chance to make it to a year. Is that what you said?
Yes.
And then that changed after he was born to really a couple days.
When he was born, so the diagnosis of trisomy 18, how it's defined is there's a 50% chance that most babies will pass away within days.
Yeah.
50% don't live past the first week. 5% live to be a year old.
Yeah.
And there's no statistics really on over ages than that.
But based on his heart condition,
Correct.
They told us that he'd never leave to see the outside of a hospital.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, he would never see the outside of a
and
hospital.
he's celebrated his 9th birthday
Yeah.
now.
He'll
So
be
he's
10.
got some fight in him.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm curious where that comes from. Who has the fight gene that they passed on?
I even told Mitch, I was like, I'm going to cry.
Totally okay.
We're used to that. It's fine.
It's, I talked about, I just said about how I asked God why a lot those first days and weeks and first months. And after he turned a month old and we kind of changed, okay, we're just going to live life. And we would go out, and I remember taking him when the first time it snowed in October, or maybe right after Halloween, and we have a picture of him with his first snow and first Halloween and first Thanksgiving and all that. And I would go to Walmart, and people would come up to me that I didn't know, and they would say, "Are you Karder's mom?" And yeah, I am. And they would say, Karder is on our prayer chain at church, and our friend told us about him, and we're praying for you. We're praying for Karder. And I would run into people at the gas station, and they would say, Karder's a miracle, because of him, I believe in miracles, or I know that he's going to be okay because he's already defied so much. And that was so encouraging. The thousands of people that we didn't even know who were praying for him all over our area. But you asked where that fight comes from. And I would like to say that Mitch and I are both very determined, strong individuals, but Karder's purpose on earth is way greater than any of us could wish to be. He's here because God wants him to be here, and he's not done telling his story.
It's powerful. So what have been the major milestones or significant moments since then and now?
Well, so he turns a month old, he turns 2 months old, he turns 3 months old, 4 months old. Right before when he turns 5 months old, he gets his first cold. And he was actually going to go spend the weekend with my parents, and he kind of had a little bit of a cold. And so I took him into the doctor just thinking something is not quite right. Let's just take him in before I send him away for the weekend. And the pediatrician listened to his heart or she had her stethoscope and she was listening to his heart, and she took her stethoscope off and put it around her neck, and she looked at me and she said, I'm going to call the ER and let them know you're on your way. Karder's in heart failure. And I grabbed him, and one of my good friends was with me, who was our babysitter, and she grabbed his car seat, and we ran out the door and got in the car, and I called Mitch, and he was an hour and a half away working, and I couldn't get a hold of him, and so I called his boss, and I told him to tell Mitch I'm headed to the ER. They're saying Karder's in heart failure. And we get to the ER, and of course they're wanting you to like sit down and wait, and I'm like, no, like we need to go back. And the nurse kind of looked at me, and she could tell Karder was a little gray, blue, gray. And so she's like, okay, yeah, bring him on back. And still they're wanting to kind of like do all the check-in stuff. And I'm like, he just needs some oxygen. Can somebody please give him some oxygen? And when you are in hospice care, you have to sign a do not resuscitate. And so a doctor came up to me as I'm asking for oxygen, and she says, you have a DNR. Do you want to give him oxygen? And I, not so nicely and emotionally, said, I don't care about the DNR, give my baby oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
And they,
when you signed that DNR, it was probably like days of his life.
Right.
In the hospital, yeah.
Lots changed since.
That's the first 2 weeks.
Yeah.
When you are sent home on hospice. Yes. And then I totally understand why.
Sure.
But we're at 5 months now. Things have really changed, and he just needs a little oxygen. And so they, they listened, and they put oxygen on him, but right away they're wanting to transport him to Omaha because he's in heart failure, essentially, we think. And so Mitch takes off and drives to Omaha over the speed limit.
A little bit.
And Karder and I flew to Omaha, and we get there, and it kind of seems like they're not in such of a hurry as we're thinking that they should be. Right. And he's stable. He has oxygen. And I guess I should back up. Karder didn't need oxygen after 3 months. So when he was born, he had oxygen. We're sent home on hospice care. He has oxygen. At 3 months, he starts with his little hands rubbing the oxygen out. I mean, like, all night long.
I don't need that anymore.
Exactly. And so we kind of finally were like, okay, he's telling us he doesn't need oxygen. So he had not been on oxygen for 2 months when this had happened, when he got sick. And so they gave him oxygen in the hospital. They transport us to Omaha, and he's stable. He's doing okay. Heart rate's staying good. Oxygen levels are staying. And so then they do some tests that night, and the next morning, or mid-morning, they come in, and we're expecting them to hear, is heart surgery or nothing? You're like, you have to make another choice. And the doctor was so sweet. She said, Karder's not in heart failure. He has RSV. Like, he just needs a little oxygen and a little bit of medicine. And she's like, we're sending you back home because we don't want you staying here where there's all this extra sickness. And she said, Karder's heart is doing great. One of the holes is already started to close, or one of them was almost closed.
One of them was closed.
One of them was closed. Another one was almost closed, and the third one would only need to close if he wanted to be a marathon runner. And so she said, Karder's heart is not going to kill him.
So the things that absolutely needed to be addressed but couldn't be addressed at birth have taken care of themselves over time.
Correct. Within 5 months.
Goodness.
Mm-hmm. And that, knowing that Karder's heart was healthy was a huge thing. It was kind of like we made the right choice at birth, that we didn't, we didn't do a surgery that wasn't necessary. Hi, Colin. And so we came back home, and he was on oxygen again for just a short time because he just had to get over this RSV. And then he, again, didn't want the oxygen anymore. So he was back off of it within a month. And I don't know, am I wrong that we really haven't had a scare like that since?
No.
So it's been slow and steady.
Yep.
Keep living
Correct.
since then.
And, you know, there's been lots of obstacles of GI and urology and every specialist that Children's has. We've seen or have a continuous plan with them. And every single time we go to see a specialist, they're just like, he's rewriting the textbooks.
Yeah.
You know, the definition of a trisomy 18 child is not
Those are cool. Can you go
what
through
Karder
them,
is
right?
fulfilling.
Yeah.
For sure.
One of the phrases that we heard with Charlotte's family, and I think is a phrase that you guys encountered as well, is the phrase incompatible with life.
Yeah.
Talk to us about what that phrase meant when you heard it, processed it, and what it means to you now.
That's the worst definition there can be. You know, Google is a great thing and the worst thing at the same time, because I remember that first night when Mitch told me, you know, what was the first thing I did is I got on Google and I Googled trisomy 18, and it literally says incompatible with life. And I think that is a huge part, a huge blessing of why we didn't know in utero. Most trisomy 18 babies are miscarried. It's 1 in every 3,000 conceptions is a chromosomal abnormality. So a trisomy 18, trisomy 21, trisomy 13, 1 in every 3,000. But it's only 1 in every 6,000 live births. And that's because so many are miscarried for a complex medical reasons. And I truly know or believe that if we had known, my Googling and stress and fear and anxieties, we would have miscarried. And so it is a huge blessing that we didn't know before. But it is gut wrenching when you are told that your child is incompatible with life. And almost in the same token, when they label him, like part of his medical diagnosis says failure to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I don't like that either.
no, it's just, I mean, you're basically telling us, or you're deciding for him that he's not gonna make it.
Yeah. You're not setting them up for success by
Right.
means when you say that to them.
Right. He's thriving.
He is.
Mm-hmm.
On his own time.
For sure. For sure.
And rules.
Yes.
And was the incompatible with life phrase something that you just found on Google, or was that presented to you from a professional as well?
That was basically how it was presented to me
Yeah.
when they told me his diagnosis. That
Yeah.
you know, they gave me the list of odds of him living.
Yeah.
You know, from a daily standpoint to weekly, monthly, yearly. You know, it was. And at that point, you're just like, there's no point.
Yeah.
Why are we even having this conversation?
Tell us about the community that you lived in. You referenced a little bit ago the strangers that you ran into at Walmart or the gas station, but just describe the community that you live in and what that has meant to Karder and your family's journey.
So when we lived in the same town for the first 18 months when Karder was 18 months old, we moved. And we moved to the community that we're in now, just shortly before his 3rd birthday. And I will say, you know, we moved away from our family, from our friends. Mitch and I both had lived there Mitch had lived there for most of his life, and I'd lived there for 8 years. Those were our closest friends and family, and they all knew Karder. They knew his story, they knew his journey, And when we moved, it was kind of a whole new grieving process because I was going to have to re-explain Karder to everyone we met and rehash those feelings of this is where we came from and this is where we are now. And I grieved probably every day until Karder was probably about 3. And we moved here, and Karder was starting preschool at our public school. There was 20 kids in his class, and they all loved Karder. You know, to them, he was just the other 3-year-old who got to ride around on the really cool scooter at recess. And so having that community who openly accepted Karder and accepted us and was excited to have him be in their class and for the parents, that made us really know that we were home, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of Karder's classmates' parents are some of our really good friends. We live in a really small community, less than 1,000 people. There's about 25 kids in Karder's class, most of whom has gone with since preschool, since he was 3, and he'll be in 4th grade this year. And to those kiddos, he's Karder. You know,
He's classmate.
They're exactly. They take turns pushing him at recess. The whole school knows who Karder is.
Yeah.
And his classmates and other kids in the school, they want to push him at recess. They want to push him on the swings. They want to have him sit with them at lunch. You know, there is nothing bigger than having your child be accepted in any situation. But having your child be different, have special needs, not be able to talk or communicate, and still being loved so much by his community is huge. It's absolutely huge. And I was lucky enough, I got to work in the school for a couple years, and I got to see how our school, the teachers, all the teachers, high school and elementary, everyone knows Karder. Some of Karder's classmates, their parents will, you know, have said to us, we are so thankful that Karder is in our community, is in our lives, because he is helping our kids to grow up to know how to treat others, how to be caring, how to be compassionate, how to not see somebody who is different looking than you are, and know how to be around them.
Yeah.
And so...
And to see beyond their can't.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think in the you mentioned earlier just how kids are able to see that innocence. For sure, they have no idea what he will accomplish because they have already seen him accomplish so much.
Yeah. Wow.
So, you know, we're sharing your month with Charlotte, who is 4. So she's about halfway to Karder. So if you could tell her the biggest thing that you've learned in your 10 years with Karder, what would you tell her?
Nothing is impossible. Nothing.
You know, nothing is impossible. If you want to go take that family trip, do it. If you want to do additional therapy because you think that it will help them, do that. Whatever you can dream or imagine, it is possible.
Oh.
It is possible. I would hope that...
Against all the odds.
Against all the odds, for sure.
Mitch, what's it like to be Karder's dad?
It's fun. It doesn't matter how bad of a day you've had. Even like when he was 1, you could come home from a terrible day at work and he's always super happy to see it. It was like you just made his day, which always made my day. And it's still that way. Like, he's super excited to see you. His happiness is always contagious.
Yeah. Obviously, based on how strong he is and everything he has fought through, there's a lot to be proud of, but what are you most proud of?
That's a tough question. I am probably most proud of him for what he has taught myself and everybody else about life. That no days given to you, don't take anything for granted.
Lacey, what about you? What are you most proud of?
You know, I feel very lucky that God gave us Carter as our first child. We didn't know any different. You know, he taught us how to be parents and how to experience the joys and the struggles of raising a child. I think it would be very different if not your first child and you had all these expectations of what a healthy, typical child would be. I feel very blessed that Carter is in our family for so many reasons. A lot like what Mitch said is that he makes us to be better people. He really does. I'd like to think that I'm a little bit more compassionate, maybe a little bit more understanding of what life can throw at you and how to take it. The joys and the blessings and the positives outweigh the struggle or the things that are more difficult 10 times over. Carter makes everyone a better person. And we've heard that a lot, is that having Carter in our lives and other people's lives, them getting to know him is a blessing. And he's always been a blessing.
So in journeys like this, it can sometimes get tough. It can sometimes be tough to be just stuck in today. How do you look towards the future, and what are the dreams that you have for Carter's life?
Earlier, like when we were talking about when Carter was 4 days old, we had to develop his life plan, his care plan. And that care plan was essentially for his 10 days. It was for his 10 days that he was supposed to be here. And he's 10 years now. You know, he's 10th birthday. And whatever dreams we could have had for his life, I would have never guessed we would have got 10 years. That his life would be so much greater than just 10 days.
Yeah. Incompatible is nonsense.
Yeah.
He's compatible and thriving.
For sure.
He's built for life.
A doctor one time told us, you have loved him to life. And, you know, I think that's amazing to hear as a parent, you know. But I think that he's given us life, too.
Yeah.
It's easy to get stuck in the, day-to-day of what life looks like. You work, you go home, you mow your grass, things like that. And when you know someone like Carter, your life, those other things are not important. It's making memories and spending time together, and raising your other children to be good people, to be good humans, to know how to love others that are different, and to show compassion. I think that we are pretty blessed and lucky to have these 3 boys.
At Go Shout Love, we do amazing things for amazing families with kids on rare medical journeys. Each month, we shout love for families through the sale of creative apparel inspired by the kids. This month's Built for Life design is inspired by Charolette and Karder, whose families were both told by doctors that their children were incompatible with life. Thankfully, that message was never received by Charolette and Karder, as they've battled through incredible odds to bring joy to everyone they meet. Every purchase in September will go toward helping Charlotte's home to be remodeled with a more accessible bathroom and the purchase of an adaptive stroller for Karder. Visit our website at goshout.love to support Charolette and Karder through the purchase of a t-shirt, hat, tank top, hoodie, or other items.